Hi, so welcome to my project. I did the Suez Canal crisis, and let's go. So, first, we're going to talk background. Um, Honestly, this is the best I can do because there is a ton of history that plays into this and like age old conflicts that really I could dig into this for at least an hour. But this is what we're going to do for now. So, after the Suez Canal was completed in 1969, it was privately owned, um, and Egypt had a small share in that. So during World War One, it was a strategic advantage, and it allowed Allied troops to move quickly throughout the globe, but it also allowed oil to flow and restricted access. So during World War Two, um, it was still justified as a strategic advantage for Britain and France to keep a hold of it, but it was mainly for the shipment and movement of oil throughout the world. And Britain used it to justify that they were going to India and protecting India and Australia and their colonies in that. But like I said earlier, they owned large shares of the Suez Canal Company, and especially Britain ended up owning about 44% after Egypt had to sell their shares to pay off debt. And another foundation for the crisis that ended up happening was the formation of the Jewish state of Israel, which caused lots of problems, and that is a completely different issue. But right now, it's just causing conflict with the canal. So moving on, another cause for conflict and leading up to this is the Egyptian Revolution of 1952. This included the overthrow of King Farouk, and this created the Republic of Egypt amidst protests to reject Western influence and troops from the country. The United Kingdom and France had interests in Egypt, and their surrounding neighbors staying under their control, and they did their best to prevent the republic from being established. But once it wasn't like the worst thing that had happened because they still had pretty good influence because they had the Suez Canal, they had ties with Israel. So things were, they were pretty the same. The new government, the president was Gamal Abdel Nasser, and he was in pretty constant communication with the United States. The CIA had operatives, and the United States really thought that they had it in the bag. They really thought they had it. But the prevailing opinion of Nasser, which was correct, is that in a conflict, the U.S. would back Israel, who were constantly, they had lots of interest in the Straits of Tiran. So they were all pretty much always encroaching on the Egyptian borders, and they were constantly skirmishing. So the U.S. was interested in buying arms, and so they were looking around for that. But since it was Israel who they were fighting, the U.S. didn't want to supply them, so they turned to Czechoslovakia, a Soviet country, and that was a little problematic because, as we know, the Iron Curtain was down in Europe, and there was we, as in the United States, were interested in a policy of containment, which is also another issue because that moves into trying to regain control of third world countries who were not yet in the first or second world. So that was a main portion of what we'll move into later, which is the Soviet and the United States fighting for control of these third world countries. But in talks, the Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, asked Egypt to join an anti-Soviet alliance in the Middle East, which they were trying to create versus doing other things. But Nasser responded that the Soviet Union had, quote, never occupied our territory, but the British had been there for 70 years. How can I go to my people and tell them that I am disregarding a killer with a pistol 60 miles from me at the Suez Canal to worry about someone who's holding a knife 1,000 miles away? So Nasser had no real concerns about the Soviet Union. And moving on, growing conflict. So nationalization was a big step for Egypt, and a big step in their journey towards that was becoming an industrialized nation. And they already had a dam on the Nile, the Aswan Low Dam, but they were building the Aswan High Dam. And Nasser was very good at playing off the United States and Russia. They were both trying to vie for control because they saw Egypt as one of the bigger powers in the Middle East, and so they thought if they could get Egypt, they could get more of the Middle East. So they were both vying for control with that. So he was good at playing off both of them. But in that, the dam, the Aswan High Dam, had been agreed to be financed by the United States and Britain because they wanted to have Egypt be more under their control, and they saw Egypt's growing ties with Czechoslovakia. And when they saw those growing ties, they withdrew their aid. But the thing that was really pushed them over the edge was that Nasser recognized the People's Republic of China versus the Republic of China. So they withdrew aid because they didn't accept the communist ideas that they had supported. But anyways, moving forward, as the dam was going to be a vital part of national infrastructure, it meant bad things because Egypt now had no way to fund the dam. And Nasser saw an opportunity with the privately owned Suez Canal, which was very much a stain on national pride for Egypt because it was not owned by the country and rather their oppressors. And Nasser declared martial law over the Suez Canal zone and seized power. And even though the overtake was abrupt and viewed kind of as not like it was viewed as an upset by Britain and France, the Egyptian government fairly bought out all the investors until they had their own control of the passage. So Britain and France were very mad about that, and Israel just didn't like Egypt, period. So Britain and France were worried that Egypt's new control of the canal, they couldn't be able to ship their oil quickly. They attempted to barter and create an agreement to regain their control, but Egypt refused. They knew they wanted the canal that was theirs. Representatives from Britain, France, and Israel met in secret to discuss an operation to attack Egypt. They agreed that Israel would move to provoke Egypt, and then Britain and France would issue an ultimatum to stand down or they would move in. And when nobody agreed to a ceasefire, the British and French moved in, dropping paratroopers in Port Said and Port Fuad, and they gained control of the country quickly, and had control and boots on the ground within a matter of days, too, in fact. However, mass opinion was not on their side, especially in the United Nations, and in a rare occurrence, both the Soviet Union and the United States condemned their actions, even though the French and British blocked very first notions to get them to ceasefire. There was a larger vote, and the United States and the Soviet Union, both superpowers, and Britain and France didn't really realize at that point they were more moving down into the third and fourth spots of power. But they were blocked, and the United Nations called for a ceasefire using their peace troops, and then later Israel also withdrew under pressure from the United States. And so it was a big win for Nasser, and even though Israel did not gain control of the Suez Canal like they wanted, they got control of the Straits of Tiran. And generally, things worked out okay. The end.